All right. Call to order the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission for May 6, 2014. We're starting at 4 o'clock, and we'd like to see if we're in compliance with the open meeting law. Ms. Clerk?
Yes, we are.
All right, thank you. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time a single speaker is allowed and may be limited. Do we have anybody who'd like to come forward and speak at this time? Seeing and hearing none? Yes?
I'd like to call roll.
Oh, yes, thank you. And we definitely want to call roll. So would you do that for me, Madam Clerk?
Chair White? Excused. Vice Chair Buckman? Excused. Member Bastian?
Here.
Member Sherman? Here. Member Lee?
Here.
Member Lopez?
Here.
Member Thomason? Excused. Member Becker?
Here.
Member Tabor?
Here.
Member Thompson?
Here.
Member McCurdy? Excused. Member Armenian? Excused. Member Aker?
Here.
Member Teal? Excused. Member Foger? Excused. And Mr. Vice Chair Buckman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Did
And
we
we're-
have the announcement regarding the compliance?
I got a little out of order, so 4.
Okay,
The clerk got me caught up.
thank you. For possible action, item 4, to approve by reference the final minutes of the regular meeting, April 1, 2014. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries. Number 5 is report for possible action from detention and enforcement regarding issues at city facilities and parks, all wards. And we see we have our officer here this evening.
I handed the report off before you arrived.
Okay. Are there questions regarding the March 2014 report crime statistics from the Marshals Unit? Anybody? Is there anything you'd like to highlight to the commission?
Well, I got a question. I'm very concerned about Hunt Ridge Park. It's sort of, in the area where we live. Have you, what's going on there? Have you heard anything? Any propensity of, something negative going on? The homeless issue? Just not really.
Much, especially, but I come in at 4.
Oh.
Night is, I read the log every day, and I don't see anything from the day shift that there are
Okay.
a lot of calls. I know once in a while we get a dispatch over there, the old shopping cart, little minor things like that, but nothing.
I know a car crashed into that park. I saw it happen. I was there. The guy ran off. And what happened? Did you ever find out anything? Oh, okay. No one was injured, by the way.
Yeah,
So.
you know about when that happened? I'll think forward, see if it was reported.
A couple weeks ago. I think it happened probably around maybe like 4 in the afternoon. But I was just wondering what happened. The guy took off on foot. So, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions? That was number 5. So, report for possible action regarding sports field revenue, and enhancements. This is the smallest.
I know, I was going to say your font's even smaller than mine. Here, let me give this to you so that you might read.
I'm like, this is the smallest I've ever written in my life.
Magnifying glass.
Yeah, I was going to say it's more important for you to read that than me. Go ahead.
All right, hey, there we go. Report for possible action regarding sports field revenue enhancements. All wards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Lonnie Zimmerman, Deputy Director of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services.
by way of background, on October 5th of 2013, I presented to the City Council on behalf of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services a plan that had been worked on by 2 previous consultants regarding revenue enhancement. At the time, it was our presentation that we wanted to be around 30 or 31% cost recovery for our department. In so doing, municipal sports would have to bear a lot of that load. During that council meeting, the mayor requested that we work towards a goal of 50% cost recovery. So what you see in front of you are the fees. They were announced. We had some discussion about it in our last Park and Rec Board meeting. At that time, I believe I talked about that we were going to brief, which we subsequently did. And now, as of last Thursday, Allie may know the date off the top of her head, but as of last Thursday, our users were notified of the fee increases that I'll walk through today. I'll move through this if you have questions, and I do want to recognize, because I was out getting Diet Coke right as we started the meeting, I know that Sally Comerford from ASA Softball is also here in the audience, so there may be some questions. If I could move through, there's 5 slides, I believe. If I could move through those and then go back and answer questions, I'd appreciate that. The first is our 2013 financials. So from last year, our municipal sports unit spent just over $1.5 million. We brought in $1.13 million for that unit, and that unit means for the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services, my department, our programming staff with some administrative oversight, is 1.5. We recover about 72% of our cost departmentally. When you take in our unit in the park maintenance cost, our expenses go to almost 11 million. They're 10,907,000, or against our revenues of 1.1, we bring in 10.39%. So our cost of providing sports fields is roughly 10, and we're bringing in about 1.1. I'm struggling like Malcolm does now. I sat too far from that. Our sports, this is our fee enhancements for the FY15 going forward. Currently, there's no light fee. Moving forward, and forward is August of this year, it would be $10 per hour. So any game played at night that we turn lights on, we'll have $10 per hour. That is the cost that it costs the city to light a sports field is $10 per hour, so we'll be revenue neutral in that category. A diamond field, which is a baseball field or softball field, our current fees, and this is for tournaments, is a camp or a clinic, so not a day-to-day game. So it's a special event. But on a diamond field, it's currently $15 for nonprofit, $30 for commercial. Plus, we get 15% of the gross revenue per team. So if a team is charging $1,000, we will receive $150 on top of our hourly fee. We are doing away with the 15% gross of registration, and it'll be flat $50 per hour for daytime use. It'll be $60 per hour with lights. A box field, which is traditionally, when we're talking about sports field, is soccer, but football, lacrosse, and various other activities, a box field is our typical rectangular field. It's currently 15 and 30, 15 nonprofit, 30 commercial, plus 15% of the gross team revenue. We're doing away with the 15% gross, and that hourly fee will go to $70 per hour, plus $80 per hour with lights. Our concession vendor permit is currently $50 per location per vendor. For tournaments, it will be $500 per event. Scoreboard use fee, currently we have $2 per day to use the scoreboard. That'll just be complimentary as part of the scoreboard use. Our community league allocations, we're pretty general in our terms, but we have 2 types. We have tournament allocations and we have league allocations. All field types moving forward are fixed building concessions. So if we have a snack bar and it's brick and mortar, it's currently $50 per allocation season. That'll move to $1,000 per allocation season.
May I ask you a question on the last slide? The $50 per hour location per vendor on the concession, was that per day or was that for the entire tournament? Right now,
are you on the see where it says community league allocations? So that's seasonal?
No, the other one above it, where it says concession vendor permit, $50 will go to $500. Was that $50 per day or $50 for like a 4-day tournament?
Per event.
Okay.
So. Our sports unit are projected, so this is 2016, when all of our fees are fully implemented and working in full year-long cycles, and our fiscal year is July 1st until June 30th. We predict our expenses will stay around 1.6 million. Our revenues will grow to 2.13, or an increase of about $1 million per year. Our cost recovery will go from 63% as a unit to 136% as a unit. More importantly, what we're really looking at, though, we'll still have about almost $11 million in maintenance and ARS programming staff against 2.1 in revenues. We'll be around 20% of cost recovery when all of our fees are fully utilized. Because I know that many of you on the Parks and Rec Board represent leagues out in the real world, so to speak, I used a breakdown of one of the things we're talking about just so folks can identify. Everybody seems, when we start talking figures, to wonder what it means to them. This is a breakdown. I'll pick on Downtown Soccer to start, only because they're at the top of the list and one of our partners. So currently at $3 a field hour, they pay us roughly $4,400 a year. That cost at $10 an hour, plus $10 an hour light fee. So assuming their current use, and that their use doesn't change at all, be $22,000 a year, so they'll see an increase of about $18,500 a year. When you look at that cost in the blue there, right in the middle, that's our cost per participant. So currently, what the city receives per participant per year for at $3 an hour is the city receives back for every child as a part of Downtown Soccer that participates on our field $7.09. The annual cost per participant at $10 a field hour and $10 at light, the city will start to receive $36 per child annually. So we'll see an increase of roughly $29.50 per participant per year. To the side of that, we have a breakdown as to what we currently receive per child on an hourly basis. Most of our fields are rented on hourly, so we also have it broken down in an hourly fee. I have Nevada Youth Football up there. I don't think there's anybody for public comment or part of the football organization here. Just to show you, theirs goes from $14,000 to $16,000. Again, the city will go from receiving $8 per participant per year to $37, and it'll cost the participant, we will receive 26 cents on the dollar rather than 6 cents on the dollar per participant per hour per year. Nevada Youth Soccer, by far our biggest user group. Currently, they pay the city just over $111,000. Their costs will go with lights and at $10 an hour, assuming the same use, to $463. They'll see an increase of $352, $191. The city will go from receiving $8.50 a child per year to $27.08 per child per year.
Excuse me, Lonnie?
Yep.
I believe you either misread or there's a typo under Nevada Youth Football League. You said 14,000.
Their current use?
Yes, and
Yeah, for
I
the
can
record,
loan you
their
the
current
glasses.
use.
I can loan you the glasses I use for the smaller print, if you'd like.
Their current use, just for the record, is $4,323 is what they pay the city. Square?
Yeah.
Good. Palo Verde Lacrosse, just to have a cross representation in here, they currently pay the city $2,835. Assuming their same use at $10 per hour per field, they'd go to $11,400. The city would see an increase of $8,600. We would go from receiving $11 per child per annum to $33.93. Southern Nevada Youth Sports Association, we receive $9,000 currently. Assuming the same use, they would go to $46,000. The annual increase to them would be $37,000. We'd go from receiving $18 per child to roughly $77 per child. Amateur softball in here. Somebody got to sit real close to Sally over there because she's going to fall over. Annual cost at $3 an hour. The city receives just over $43,000. The annual cost at $10 per field, and assuming the same night use would be $266. The increase to ASA would be $223, $250. The city would go from receiving $40.35 per child per annum to $207.71. The cost per participant per hour is increased at 16 cents per hour. Lone Mountain, I broke down because I know we also have a District 4 representative in here. That's why the rest are Little League, so there could be some gauge of what the impacts are. Lone Mountain would go from $13,000 to $63,000. Annual increase of $49,000. Mountain Ridge goes from 22 to 80, or to 103, annual increase of 81,000. Pecoli 6,900 to 23,000. Red Rock Little League 8,000 to 30,000, and Western Little League 8,200 to just over or almost 32,000. I've obviously, for the record, skipped over some of the numbers in there, but just to give a rough draft. Our financial impact for sporting events, these are tournaments, just to give some idea to the tournaments. Because our tournament numbers are how to articulate it, our fees are already currently higher for tournaments than they are for our allocation play, so you don't see the same impacts or the same large increases in our tournaments that you do in a lot of our allocations. But for the record, the Amateur Softball Association, the JO Classic, the current event, they pay us almost $20,000, $19,665. Projected for the 16 event would be 26. That'd be a $7,100 increase. For LVSSA, SSUSA World Championship, they currently pay us just over $20,000. Their projected would be $32,000. That would be a $12,000 impact. Desert Fall Classic Baseball Academy currently pay us $10,396. Their projected would be $11,334, just under $1,000. The Pigskin Classic Football currently pays us $24,000. They're projected to pay us $20,047. That actually is the one number that's in red and goes down because of the cost. We would actually receive less because of the percentage we would no longer take in gross registration. Best of the West Classic lacrosse event would go from $16,500 to $21,000, increase of almost $5,000 a year. Las Vegas Invitational, this is the Heat Soccer Tournament, $20,000 to $37,000, with an increase $16,600. Kings Cup Adult Soccer, $26,325 is, or $26,325 is what we currently receive from them. It would go to $28,000, an increase of $2,000. Vegas Cup Soccer Tournament, $38,000 would go to $53,000, increase of $14,500. Premier SC Invitational will go from $46,000 to $67,000 for an increase of $21,500. That concludes. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Can we get a copy of that?
You bet. In fact, just for the record, I'll leave this copy with the clerk tonight, but Ali Mikos will be glad to send everybody on the board tonight this presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, okay, as well.
We'll get it out tonight before we leave.
Lonnie, I guess my question is, what is this compared to the budget or the taxpayers' contribution to the city Parks and Recreation? How does this compare to what the budgeted line items are?
I want to try to answer to give you the answer to the question. I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly the question. So,
well, this is revenue based on what participants are paying and based on the revenue increase plan, or the plan to increase revenue, and the cost recovery. So if the cost recovery goes from 72% or 10%, this is held against your budget?
yes.
And the general fund,
did
Mr.
you-
White, then what I assume the general fund picks up the other 80%?
Currently, right now, if you look at, and one of the things we've been really trying to look at is our true cost. With the consultants that came in and worked, is really looking at the true costs. So we have to factor in park maintenance, and then currently we're just under $1 million a year to light our sports fields. In so doing, that's what that bottom number is, where we're recovering 10.39%. Those are our true costs to operate sports fields. So right now, and I'll try and use the person first language so I don't offend anybody out there, but my son plays club soccer. We don't cover our cost in club soccer, so you're actually subsidizing by the utilities, by the park maintenance, and by the field allocation fee. You're actually, if your child's not in soccer, you're subsidizing my child's participation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And currently, right now, the general taxpayer, without somebody using a sports field, is subsidizing roughly 70% to 80% of that participation.
And respectfully, everyone pays for the quality of life involved in these parks. So that's something that we all have a responsibility to do. I was just kind of personally just trying to weigh in where that fit into the budgetary line item. So. Thank you.
And also what did Parks and Recreation do to look at there's two sides of cost recovery, right? There's the cost recovery that you get from the participation in the fields, but there's also the cost that you establish as your true cost. And what has the Parks and Recreation Department done to try to reduce the cost, so your cost recovery could also go up in that particular case if you reduce the cost?
Yeah, well, I think departmentally, we haven't done anything recently because 3 years ago, 42% of our staff was laid off. So we've been, and that's is in any government function. That's where your costs are. My 1.5 is all staff. There's very little service and supply money. So we're talking staffing in municipal sports. There's to provide the product that we do at 156 sports fields a night, to have those lit and programmed. We're not going to get too far away from as far as that expense. I can't speak for park maintenance because they're in another department. I truly don't know their balance to know whether they're well balanced, not balanced. You know, I factored in, you look at a complex like Majestic or KZ, there's a lot of park there. So, and I don't, because they're not in our department, we haven't done anything to look at their cost as to whether they should get rid of staff or further.
Is that something that the city council should look into? Because that, I would imagine, would have to be part of the metric, because you're basing your cost recovery on park maintenance that you don't really have any oversight or insight into in terms of those fees.
We don't have oversight, we have insight. I think, to be clear for the record, we do have insight. We don't have oversight because they're out of another department. I'm not on the ground every day, and I think some of our user groups in here would have a better idea of the level of maintenance or the level of conditions of our sports fields. I think if we ask those, you know, 60-some thousand acres of sports fields after they probably don't feel overstaffed, and I don't know what the appetite would be. The only real way to cut costs out there is to cut staff.
And Commissioner Becker, Lonnie was answering to his best knowledge. However, I do recall that park maintenance has done cost-saving measures in replacing some of the grass with long-term artificial turf that they felt would bring down some of the cost or cost savings in the future. And they've done that a couple times in replacing some of those artificial turfs. So that
I was under the impression that was about roughly the same. Artificial turf versus regular fields, is that about the same over the long term?
it's an interesting and something we look at a long time. If you look at the initial cost because of the capital investment of artificial turf, there's the initial high end, and then what you'll see is the amortization of the sports field and the lack of maintenance needed as far as water and utilities and staff to mow that grass. You see that artificial turf becomes more cost savings. And then obviously after the term of that, right now at KZ we're looking at adding, replacing 5 fields. That goes to 2.5. So the best I can give you is with a theoretical model, not a scientific model, is you run about revenue neutral over a 20-year period because you have to keep factoring in the capital replacement cost of new turf. From a programming side, myself and Jim and Allie, we love it because you don't have the weather delays. It doesn't matter to us if it's 6 degrees outside or 60 degrees outside. We can program it. So in our world, you will drive more revenue off an artificial turf field. You don't have the weather delays that you have in other sports, and we can program them around the clock. We'll drive more revenue off an artificial turf field, but I think that the true answer to yours is you run about revenue neutral because of the need for replacement every 7 to 10 years.
That was my understanding.
Sure. Thank you, because I think that those answers are going to be important for informing or less informed individuals as you display this chart.
Thank you. Lonnie, I'm interested in having you explain to us where the utilities, the lighting for the fields, water, things like toilet paper, is that down in the maintenance side, the park maintenance side, or where is that located when you're looking at cost recovery?
Well, let me answer it in a couple ways. One is for a tournament, we give the field, if I can pick on David sitting next to me, and David's going to run the best soccer tournament ever. When he comes in and rents a field for us, he's now in charge of the custodial aspect. So we don't supply toilet paper. We want the park returned to us the same way that David takes it over Thursday. So what you really see in the maintenance cost and the sports unit cost, about 800 and some thousand of that we've gotten the utility bills down from their all-time high are part of that maintenance That's the rolled together cost right there. Commissioner Vashon is 10.9. That accounts for our park maintenance side, our sports side, and our utilities for providing
Oh,
that.
okay.
And unlike when we were leisure services, the utility costs were actually in traffic and engineering's budget. Those during the merge, when everybody started paying attention to what things were costing them, were shifted to our department. So utilities are now part, for sports fields, are now part of our line items.
Chairman? Can you go back like to either slide 3 or 4 where you were talking about the, yeah, right there. So you didn't extend it one more column, which would be the percentage of change, right? So if I'm just looking at LVSSA's tournament, I'm thinking it's about a 60% increase to the organization that puts on the tournament, correct?
I'm trying to do the math. in
It
my
goes
head.
from
So
20 to
19
32,
22.
so about $12,000, right?
Yes.
Okay. So did you, is that about the norm for the rest of them without, is everybody getting at least a 60% hit? Or I saw somebody's getting a huge increase.
Are they, no, to answer your question, part of it comes from the demand of use. There are some organizations that put 500 teams on our fields for 2 days, and there's some that put 500 teams on our fields for 300 days. So, and then the other aspect too, tournaments are a little bit more difficult in that our revenues jump. What you'll see if you were to look at our revenues, because we take that 15% of gross registration, our revenues are well above the $15 and $30 per hour per field, because we're taking 15% of their registration too. What you can see when you look at the relative ends of all our different participation is who has really high entry fees and who has low entry fees, because that's where it comes from. So you won't see a consistent 60% from downtown soccer, 60% from LVSA, 60%. Mike doesn't do tournaments, his group doesn't do tournaments, but you won't see that because of the fluctuation of registration fees. What I can tell you is we've broken down, like if an organizer were to call me, I can tell you what you paid last year, what it broke down to in an hourly fee. Our tournaments generally ranged from $35 an hour to about $88.50 an hour is what an organization paid us, and that is the $15 an hour plus the 50% registration fee. Did I convolute that, or did that make sense?
You probably have a follow-up to mine,
I
right?
do. The Senior Softball Association is to the point where we can no longer sustain the fees that we now have to play on these fields. We had 480 teams last year in that tournament. We anticipate having over 500 this year. However, if these numbers are included, we probably will not be able to play on any of the city fields, and we'll have to cap our tournament at fewer teams than that. As you well know, you're the only entity that we deal with that has this high of fees for the field use of the fields, which includes the 15% of the entrance fees, includes taking care of all the janitorial work and et cetera, and that's not included in any of the other City of Henderson, Boulder City, the county. It makes it difficult to justify using these fields.
And I think trying to be very neutral here is obviously my programming staff that's sitting in the corner is very sensitive to that because they deal with the users every day. I think just if I could ask the board's patience and understanding is we were asked to go at 50%. We're still nowhere clear of that 50%. But I think those are our orders, and that's why you're seeing the numbers you're seeing. I think also this is, with no disrespect meant to the former leadership of the city, is this is the first time people are really beginning to look at what it costs and who we serve. This board has been through, many of you have been through some of our other presentations on youth sports. And that was probably the start, if I see the chairman kind of giggling, but that was kind of the start of folks paying attention to participation and revenues and expenses that are out there. And the city is still somewhat new at understanding what our true costs are, but just so that we all maintain perspective is our staff is going down a road as they've been asked to go down.
In regards to our tournament, basically our tournament, the 500 teams are 95% from out of town. If they play at Lorenzi or down here, they tend to stay at the hotels downtown. If they have to go play at Aurora Grande and Big League Greens and those places, they're not gonna stay downtown. So if the city needs to be cognizant of maybe not just what it means to the Parks and Recs Department, they need to understand that it's a big deal for the city as a whole.
And I think as we presented, which I think actually kicked off this presentation this month, is we had applied analysis, look at our revenue impacts. We are keenly, as a department, sensitive to that, is understanding what the economic impact was. I kind of wish 5 years ago when we were going through our cuts, it wasn't something we really paid attention to, but when you cut a department, the equivalency of that could be as much as, a $30 million economic impact if you take the sports fields out of the equation. So we're still continuing to work on applied analysis, looking at what each respective tournament means to the greater Las Vegas. So that point's well taken. Commissioner Becker.
Just to echo, I wanted to get in primarily because I think it echoes this, is I don't represent a league. I do have a daughter that's involved in a league at softball. I happen to be out at Majestic Park this weekend. The parents are extremely concerned about the viability and sustainability of their organization. And worse than that, to some degree, is even if they found a way to pass on the costs that are going from, let's say, $50 a year to $200 a year per person, that you're going to price out the lower middle income families out of participation, which is actually the reason the city of Las Vegas subsidizes these parks to begin with. You subsidize them so that you don't have downtime. The kids are going out and doing graffiti. Instead, they're being nurtured into very positive role models so that they can go on and get things like scholarships, et cetera. I just wanted to kind of make that comment. And I think part of the impact, actually, even look at the petition that's going around. They're trying to raise like 5,000 signatures. It won't necessarily go to the Parks Department. It'll certainly go to City Council. I think one of the questions they have too is, even though it's awful that hindsight didn't happen and that these fees weren't increased over time, there's nothing that says that maybe we need to look at maybe a better incremental program or plan so that you don't see these huge rate increases that feel tremendous, that put organizations into a tailspin. And has that really been thought out? I mean, right now the way we see it is this is like over a 2-year period where it's like in some cases 100% and then another 100% on the new rate within a 2-year period. Has anybody thought to float this out over 5 years?
I think I'm comfortable in saying that every scenario that by our staff and by the consultants we work with has been thought out. And again, just to remind the board, is moving forward is we're doing as the mayor asked of us. And I have a question, Lonnie. Is this consistently a result of that report, the independent report that came out several years ago, where we had that, they had the group of people that came in, were slightly agitated about the possible recommendations?
I think, Mr. Chairman, what you're referring to is the audit, and that was done by our city auditing. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that was part of it, only to bring to light some of the revenue-generating organizations on the outside. And obviously, there's always a complaint that people aren't, anytime you have to tell somebody no, there's a certain complaint that there's bias in the system or that we aren't giving people fields. I think, though, as much as the audit has been a challenge to the department, it's more as a result of still having a shortfall and our budget still not being balanced and still using our reserves and the revenue to justify it. As the city manager's been very direct in that our thematic goal is to raise revenues, and I think we've been asked organizationally to raise 7.2 to close that gap because we're not sustainable yet. We're not running a balanced budget, and obviously being one of 3 or 4 revenue generating departments is we are one of those that raises them. As an overall department, just by way of explanation, is we have about 66,000 programs. SafeKey, our rentals, our actual park rentals, not sports rentals, but folks getting married, folks having special events, the big rentals, and sports are your economic drivers. If we're going to close the gap in raise money, is we've chosen to do it in those with the most volume of activity. We still subsidize, and I think it's important to know that 65,998 programs out there are still subsidized by the general and able to offer those. So part of closing the revenue gap is that Sports and SafeKey will continue to drive the revenues.
So we're nonpartisan, however, this feels like a raising of the taxes as opposed to raising of the taxes. So,
I was kind of curious as a follow-up to Commissioner Becker's comments, and maybe I just need to be refreshed. What kind of communication and has gone out to these folks particularly that are going to be impacted?
We did it twofold. Now typically, and you'll remember even under our old administration, we worked, I would say, more collectively together. But one of the things that would happen is we would begin to have discussions about our thoughts and meet with certain community groups, and they would get to the council before we even had a chance to present it. We were pretty open with our groups this year that we would present it to our council and have their feedback first, and then present it to our groups. In this process that's gotten us here today, what I did is I would call most of our cornerstone groups, our larger groups that would be impacted, gave them an idea and asked for their patience. I think there's folks in this room that I met with personally just because of who they were, and told them what we were thinking. Part of that is because we wanted to be able to tell the story and then have people on either side make rational decisions. So it's been a little bit different in that this time we briefed our council first of what our idea was in accordance with their direction, and now have told the staff. We did not have, as you were probably a part of, was the true community meetings where we surveyed everybody in the business about all the different impacts.
So my next question is, what form is the community going to be provided when they do have feedback? Is it going to be here? Is it going to be city council? Or is there going to be a special opportunity when the individuals start to recognize this and want to provide feedback?
I think that, obviously, as we're not trying to invite folks to the open council meeting, I think that in our thought is, and as Commissioner Becker talked about, those signatures probably aren't going to be presented to me. They'll probably be copied to me. I think, and I can say this from our department, from the city manager's level and from the council level, I don't think there's any resistance to open dialogue. But I think in getting that message through is obviously that it's presented to the managers. The council's asked for, and the mayor specifically, 50% revenue, but the city manager is the one who gives the direction. So hypothetically playing out, if you have signatures, I would imagine they will either be presented to me to give to either a respective council person and or the city manager, or given directly to that person. But as far as an open public meeting for discussion right now, that's not on the agenda. It's being...
Well, this is an open public meeting, so if in fact they do show up here, we'll welcome that opportunity. But I'm just, as we go through this discussion, it might be a natural trickle in or massive step in, because this is a forum for them to express
It's been, if I might, Mr. Chairman, it's been my opinion, or my experience, I should say, that anytime you raise fees, particularly with sports groups, is that there's a significant amount of public participation. And to be honest, it's twofold. One is there's a lot of people out there. There's probably 35,000 participants on any given night that are in some varied sports. The other is folks are passionate about sports. For many of them, it's not only their hobby, it's their lifestyle. So there's no doubt that folks are circling the wagon, so to speak, and starting to form their communication.
So if in fact that opportunity presents for this commission to address the circled wagons in a productive manner, if you could give us some type of insight or fair warning, as you've done in the past. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so these figures that you've shown us, are these are permanent? These have already been decided upon, or will there be, I guess you could say, an appeals process, where if in the event that folks, let's say, come out and revolt against these figures, would we be the first ones to hear from them to make adjustments, or are these numbers fixed?
To be fair to your question, I don't think you'd be the first one, I would assume, with the council, because Channel 13 was calling yesterday. They were probably not the first ones to hear about the public concern of fees. Nor do I think. I think that obviously Amy Tabor and Mike, you guys are on the fields or have significant others that are around the fields every day. The information is probably not going to be presented to this board as quickly as it will be presented on the sports field tonight or via phone call or in that respect. experientially, it's been that the council hears first, is the minute there's somebody upset, particularly a group that might represent 17,000 youth soccer players, or I don't know how many are in ASA, but those groups don't stay quiet long, and they go right to the council. I suspect that the dialogue will begin because, to answer your question specifically, is those are the sports rules that we publicly notice that will go into effect in August. That will typically generate immediate conversation with either the respective city manager and or the council.
So these numbers are fixed?
Yes. Well, it's a fluid government system. Anything can be
And
changed, but yes, these are our
And Commissioner
recommendations.
Lopez, as I mentioned before, they've given us ample notification when they're starting to feel like there's a large group to come. And what we'll do is we'll welcome that for any of the commissioners that are representative on those sports commissions, because this is a vehicle, public and available, whether anybody knows it or not, though. So we do have a question here, and then.
Mike Aker with Little League Baseball. The big complaint that I have is the lack of communication. All my leagues are coming saying they just got hit with this like overnight. They feel that the city is just wanting to get rid of the youth programs.
I think I can speak Commissioner Akers on behalf of that, and it's easy to say that the city's not trying to get rid of youth programs. I think as far as our staff, I think anytime you raise fees, you'll certainly see some folks no longer able to use that service, whether it be gas or whether it be a sports field. But I am 100% confident in indicating that it's in no way intention do we not want to have Little League baseball or soccer. It has been different, and that experience is different for people because we didn't actively engage the community like we used to. And again, I've been very transparent with the council and as well as everybody else who's had the conversation. It's because in the past we could never tell the story before folks got to the council. We didn't have that chance to make the recommendation or the presentation.
Would the city be, because right now, I'll tell you, I've got 14 leagues. Okay, out of the 14 leagues, I can tell you right now that probably 7 of them will fold because there's no way in heck they can afford this. With the numbers, even if they raised the fee to $500 per player, they couldn't afford it because they've only got like 6 teams in their league. They can't afford fees like this. Is there a way that the city's going to work for these nonprofit groups or work with the nonprofit groups? Because if not, I may as well tell them to fold it up right now.
I don't think, again, speaking as both the deputy director and presenting this to Parks and Rec Board, it's not the city's intention, I think. And obviously, the other side of that is we don't need 50,000 people marching on City Hall, but I think the story has to be told. And that's obviously and I'm not saying, that's part of public government, you can march on City Hall. Sure. But the story has to be told in the avenues that I think everybody's aware of, and there's a lot of civility in this room, there always has been, but be it as the president of District 4 Little League or as a Park and Rec commissioner, anytime that we're given instruction, we don't always look at unintended consequences. And in youth sports, I think each of us could go around and not to, I think Amy Tabor's got a different perspective of youth sports than Mike Aker does, than Commissioner Bastian does. We all have different perceptions. I think it's also fair to say the council has a different perception of A, B, and C, what youth sports might mean to them or what the business of operation may be. So, to answer your question and still stay somewhat neutral, I think we're all aware of the avenues that can bring success, and I think the city needs to understand, the city as a whole, and my department included, what would know if those fees go into effect or are asked, what are the impacts to Little League?
So, I'm just going to make a little sidebar.
No,
It comes down to quality of life and whether or not our tax structure allows us to take advantage of the quality of life in the city of Las Vegas. I'm independently speaking for myself in that typically when that becomes a challenge, the politicians, the council people look at what we need to do as a city and either raise taxes or lower taxes accordingly. So if we were the Water District Commission and we were saying that more people are drinking water, do we independently just raise the cost of water? We see the power company do it all the time. And what we're doing is we're raising the cost to participate in recreational activities in the city of Las Vegas. When we do have the opportunity to spread that cost amongst every taxpaying resident in the city of Las Vegas. So it's interesting because now it makes me focus on our city leaders and whether or not they're willing to raise the taxes in one regard, or are they just passing on the cost and avoiding the responsibility of addressing the subject matter, and then pushing it back to people who want to enjoy the quality of living in their own cities. It's just a statement. So
I just wanted to see the answer to this question. So these fee increases are the recommendations that are going to forward to council now. And what is the process for schedules of fees for the future? And what can you anticipate? Can these groups anticipate that it'll be for a year, 6 months?
That's an interesting question. In the twofold approach, and kind of to address what Commissioner Becker had to say, is one of the things we have suffered from is we haven't had incremental fee increases over the year. And I think we probably discussed this as a board, during the good times when we were returning $1 million a year to the general fund, nobody really thought about raising fees because we didn't think about sustainability. It would be my recommendation, and hoping not to get shot at the table, but I would much rather see a CPI plus 1% or plus 2% every year, so that when Allie's running the department and Kelly 15 years from now and I'm retired, that a 2% increase could be absorbed and they're not sitting here asking for 30% increase going through the same thing. I haven't been real aggressive on that, only because we need to get some form of fee out there, but it would be my recommendation, and not just for sports fees, but for all of our department fees, the same science is true. We haven't had a lot of fee increases out there, but once we begin to adjust those, is then every July 1st in our fiscal year is to increase it by 1.75% or 2.5%. No different than the theory when I pull into Starbucks. I don't really flinch. I just kind of snicker when my coffee's gone from $3 to $3.07. I'm cognitively aware that it's gone up 7 cents, but it doesn't have me stressed out that a $9 cup of coffee would, because they hadn't raised it for 3 years. But that would be my recommendation, but we're not close to that yet.
And just for the board's information, if there needs further clarification in this area, I did see a fee increase for summer camps, and for Seiki, correct? So those are some of the programs besides the youth sports programs that my grandchildren and nephews and nieces in the Las Vegas area. So I didn't want anybody to be left with the impression that only the sports unit and those user groups are being impacted. It looks like across the board that you're looking at other fees as well, and other people to kind of share that burden of reaching that cost recovery goal that you're trying to reach.
And I know, I just happened to read in the paper this morning that Henderson's doing the same. Their fees are posted in today's RJ. I didn't really study it because I know we have and I think one of the things that I try to caution folks around is we always look at regional data, and I think it's important to know we're not too askew. But Henderson doesn't write checks to pay our bills, and we don't write them to pay theirs, and certain departments emphasize different resources, particularly whether it be a pool or a sports field or a center or an amenity within a park. So comparative data can sometimes be a little bit biased in what the costs are, but everybody's raising their fees right out of
and I do want to say, just on, because I follow those trends more than personally more than the sports field allocation fees, other than through Park and Rec Board. But I do want to say thank you for publishing in advance the information that those other fees are going to be raised. They were in brochures, they were in flyers. Staff were very forthcoming at the centers saying we're going to see a fee increase, especially for those customers who might only participate once a year in a summer camp experience. That increase might have impacted them personally as well. Summer camp is a weekly fee, and so individuals. But I would say that the user groups at Mirabelli, they know I'm a Parks Commissioner. They come to me for a lot of information when I hit the doors, because I'm there quite a bit, and certainly expressed concerns that it's impacting their pocketbook personally, but understood that it was more important to be able to have those programs made available to their young people so that they didn't see an elimination such as what happened 4 or 5 years ago where significant cuts were done in the department. Centers were closed, programs were closed, and so forth. So they're willing to come a little, I'm not saying that that undervalues what the concerns are of the sports folks, just to let you know that another set of user groups are recognizing the impact of the fee increases, but are willing to accept those little fee increases so that they can sustain those programs and have them offered to their kids.
Commissioner?
Lonnie, I have a question. You said a couple times that this time you did kind of a different process, where you didn't let the user groups know exactly what was going to be happening so that you could brief the city council first. But I kind of assume the rest of that sentence is what happened in the past, but could you clarify what would happen in the past? You'd say, we know they'd go to the city council. And then what would happen?
Typically, I can use it, I'll use Jim, but in the past, experientially, I can't speak for everybody that's ever worked in sports, but experientially, if I went to Jim Strichko, who was running, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, he's running ASA softball. The minute I left or suggested a fee, they would start to call the different respective council people and indicate, hey, if you do this, I'm going to have 10,000 people oppose that. And the council didn't want that. And again, it's not just an individual. It's also, you got to remember, we were during really good times. And to be fair to all the respective council members over the past 15 years, is when you're flush with money, nobody's really looking at what could happen. And I don't think any of us believed the recession would hit us as hard as it did. But typically what would happen is the organizers would, at the very grassroots level, like most youth sports are, begin to talk to the council people about all the impacts of not raising fees. And our council folks did not. And you also have to remember, too, at the time, prior to changing the ordinance last year, is all fee increases had to be presented in front of the council. So it was actually a presentation to the council, very much like, you were not a part of it, but very much like a very interesting meeting we had with the Parks and Rec Board one time when all the youth sports organizers came out, is there was always a certain amount of apprehension, I think, to gather every youth sports organizer in town and their respective youth organizations and have them come into council for what might not be a discussion. But we didn't float it out this year. I had some conversations as we began to brief with some of the cornerstone people in our large organizations, just to let them know. Undoubtedly, once you discuss it, it gets out and there's some conversation to let them know it's coming down. But we made sure that we were the first ones to tell our council what our recommendations were.
So the public would get with the council, and then the council would end up not changing fees because they felt pressure before it ever really even happened.
I can't speak for each individual council person, but that was my experience, is that we were never afforded the opportunity to present it in a professional capacity because the public had made their will known prior to.
Thank you.
And we want to start to twirl this down a little bit, so commissioners, understandably, Becker.
Just, question and statements, just so we can wrap it up quickly. In your modeling, since you used a sort of a cost recovery model in order to determine your fee increases, I'd be really curious to know if you also factored in loss of participation into your cost recovery, because if you do have this dramatic cost, if you have dramatic loss of participation, then your cost recovery model won't hold up unless that was already factored in.
If you look at, and that's the hard part for our department, is looking at, most of our initial recommendations were balanced on trying to get to about a 33% cost recovery model, the national standard. The mayor asked us for 50, so that's a different world for us, and we're modeling to that. But I will tell you this, we absolutely expect a change in modeling, not in pricing, but my heart tells me that we will see some people drop off our fields. My heart also tells me, and let's just talk tournament more so than the day-to-day allocation, is we have really tried to stay with local tournament organizers. We will see some tournament organizers go away, and we will see national people step in and run those tournaments. To get to 50%, that'll have to be a change to the model, because we'll need to start dealing with larger organizations that can fund that. I think that that's a byproduct of modeling it at 50%. But yes, we do. It's just like when we model SafeKey. When we raised our fees in SafeKey, participation would have to drop by 30%. Modeling SafeKey for participation. In 50%, we're nowhere near 50% right now in our modeling as was presented, but we'll certainly see a loss of participation.
Well, then, I guess that does dovetail right into the one comment I wanted to make, and then I'll pass it back to the chair. Thank you for allowing me to take so much time today.
Just want to make
and that is that we have the drop-off participation. I'd really like the department and the city council to take a look at which organizations are going away, because those organizations quite often will probably be the lower income people. The ones that don't go to Save Key this summer are going to be the ones that can't afford Save Key this summer. So really the benefit that the city is supposed to do for lower income families, which is what tax funds do help, is lower income families and lower middle income families, those are the people that are going to be bearing the brunt of this in terms of the fact that participation is no longer accessible to them. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the whole thing's unfortunate, just for the record. We talked about the recession. I know there's still a lot of people suffering in things financially. And this sort of reminds me of the university system where our tuition's going up 17% in the next 4 years. And so I'm worried about the adverse effects that this is going to have. I think we need to prepare for an earful from people who are going to be expressing their displeasure about fee increases. You know, I think it's unfortunate that we have to, I guess, come to this because that's the way it is. You know, and like Mike said, you know, teams are going to fold. And I think that's terrible. It's just unimaginable. There's a lot of, you know, young people out there who are trying to do the right thing, to you know, get involved in sports, to be engaged in doing something clean, and to think that, you know, this is going to happen is just going to tear that, you know, all that down. And so I think there's going to be a lot of repercussions from this in the future. So I think we need to prepare for that.
And thank you, Commissioner Lopez.
I'm not sure that this is appropriate discussion for this council, this board, but is it possible to set up some type of a scholarship fund for people who don't have the funds? Is it possible to do fundraising to have those funds available for people who cannot afford, or is that, you can't mix?
I think, and thank you for that solution, because and I really want to appreciate Lonnie Zimmerman as the Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation for sitting here once again and fielding these types of questions, because as Commissioner Lopez pointed out, some of those angry people are here at the table, and we have a voice, and those voices are presented sometimes through us, representing the community. So that's one of the reasons, as the chairman I was saying, or suggesting, that we be notified if in fact there is a large interest in individuals wanting to come here and speak their voices and having public comment, because it's something that some of the commissioners have experienced, some of us haven't experienced, but the city and Lonnie and previous administrations did a very good job in providing us with the information and allowing us also to represent ourselves and or our communities while we address the questions from the sports directors. What were they, Lonnie? The people who came out that one time.
The different community league organizers.
Yeah, community organizers. So again, bottom line is, thank you, Lonnie, for sitting here and fielding the questions from us. We know, and I anticipate they're a lot less sensitive away from this table, and good luck. Because like, as you said, this is moving forward, and this is something that has been in place and will continue to stay in place. The city council people members have a lot to consider, because this is a quality of life discussion. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to number 7. And or Bob, do we take public comment, or can we take public comment, or do we go at the end with number 8? Okay. So if there's any public comment for that particular subject, we'll take that at the end. Moving on to number 7, report for possible action regarding organizational project by Lonnie Zimmerman, Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation and Neighborhood Services, all wards.
I just quickly wanted to point out, May 22nd will be the grand opening of the Myron Levitt Skate Park, or JC Park for us old timers, and it's at 2:30. Garside Pool, we're praying the contractor turns it over. It's ahead of schedule, but we are going to try to have the grand opening in the third week of June, just to mark your calendars. We can't set it right now because we can't take over and have an event at a pool while the punch list items haven't been addressed, because then we void our warranties. But for those that are going to be here in June, we're looking at the third week of June for Garside Pool. And then Corporate Challenge closing ceremonies pool party is at the Grand next Saturday. Jim left us, but Jim's our mascot. And it's at the Zero Skate Pool, which I believe is on the 4th floor of the Grand. But if anybody wants to go or come by for the Corporate Challenge closing ceremonies, please let me know, and I'll get you the exact directions.
You said, okay, skate park at 2:30?
Yep.
On the 26th?
May 22nd.
Or 22nd?
I
Okay,
believe that's a Thursday.
okay. Thanks.
And that's which part?
Myron Levitt Skate Park.
JC Levitt.
Just want to make sure we're at the right part.
J.C. Clark.
Does that complete your report?
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. There's no questions. We'll move to number 8, citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No subject may be acted upon by the commission unless the subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak? Okay. Well, having said that, meeting adjourned.